There's a line of trees up here, and if you look on the old maps, you can see where the road came up there. I had to go a little bit further down, but it came out there.
So just a bit further down from where the entrance is now.
If you go down this road, you'll see two lines of trees. You can see them here emerging.
Oh yes.
With some very old oaks on one. Probably this gap here will show us. You can tell by the age of the trees. So you've got an oak there.
Ah yes.
That would have been on one side of the track. And this one that's recently fallen over would have been on this side. So that is the track. You can see it there, look.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's where Charles would have come. And of course it didn't go round to the left when it goes past White Ladies. It went straight across, following the line of the electric poles. It went straight across to Shackley and then across to Cosford on the old Worcester Road. So that's the road he'd have come on.
A more direct route, as it were.
A more direct route, yeah. We don't know why they moved this across. Possibly that was too narrow. But you can see where the road used to be there. And so this track is almost identical. This is what that track would have looked like, yeah. All the way down.
Yeah.
Yeah, just stone. And well, I mean, for horses it was fine, a few stones in it. And so I would love to think of them, that party with the Duke of Buckingham and all of the party that escaped with him, you know, coming down here on their horses.
Mm-hmm.
They must have been very glad to see White Ladies Manor House.
You can still imagine it, can't you, in the quiet when you're here?
Oh, you can. Well, I think you absolutely can.
Because it's still pretty remote, isn't it? It's still away from everything.
Yeah, well, of course, White Ladies were reputed to be one of the reasons that the monks came here originally was because it was such a quiet spot, and you know, it's still, until they did the development of White Ladies, still reputed to be the least populated parish in England, Boscobel. It's now got a few more houses in it. And of course the other thing is White Ladies was reputed to be the centre of England and Wales, and you know, that's why it's still important for those who believe in the occult. It's a place of significance. But I love these trees that would have, I don't know, would have they have seen, I mean, if you get a date on that, maybe that tree was standing there when the king came past, possibly. And these are the fish ponds here. No, you really need to come in the winter, to be honest. You can see the surround to them as well. And when you look on the street of Portrait, you can see these fish ponds. So he was actually he was setting up his easel just down from the fish ponds, or maybe just about back into that field. And these, of course, picked up the water that was coming down that stream, which comes down off. There's two streams that come down from Boscobel. This is a smaller stream.
It's just beyond these fish ponds.
Just on the other side of that. Let's see how much deeper these are. Yeah. And they would have let water into these fish ponds. You can see an end of it there, can you, sort of, you know, down there, it's been dug out.
Yes.
And you can see where they've made the banks up.
So this would have been used by the nuns?
Yep, they would have almost certainly done commercial fish farming here for the area, which would have been, you know, they like to eat fish. And they'd have grown, it's quite fertile soil here, they'd have grown some crops on these fields around.
So effectively we've walked past White Ladies to our left,
yeah.
The Priory, just a bit further on, then there's a little opening in the path, isn't there, to the left, into the field, and where this field is basically is where the manor house would have stood.
Yeah, and the gatehouse was somewhere about where that hedge is. The gatehouse would have stood a little bit away from the manor house. And then, of course, the reason they built anything here at all was because of this stream here that runs down. Again, we've got indications like pieces of sandstone here that they've been carried here. They're not natural. You know, they've been used for something to do with the gatehouse or the priory or something. But what you've got, and it runs all the year round, even now, you see it's very, very dry now. You've got this very clean water coming down off Boscobel Bank, which in terms of the priory, for drinking water, for washing, for everything. And then a little bit further down the stream, down there about 200 or 300 yards, was the mill. Can you see that bush through there?
Yep.
That's about where White Ladies Mill was. And they dammed it down there, so it created a pool which they used to put through the mill. This is the reason why White Ladies Priory is here, and would have been quite a community. I mean, there might have been only 4 or 5, 6 nuns, but there would have been, people. This is the mill field here. This is where they'd have grown the corn, a very fertile field. The spices is beyond it. And the interesting thing about the spices field, it's on the slope like that, and it's exactly the same slope and direction as you need for solar panels today. So obviously they knew that was the best angle for the sun. So for some reason it grew good spices, whatever they were wanting to grow, which have been things like herbs, and they'd have used those to treat. So this would almost sort of like a hospital as well. And then this is the chapel field, and then that field that comes down to that tree there is known as the Osmer, which is the horse moor. So that's where Humphrey's horse used to graze, and that's where the mill pool was, and that's the horse they used to take Charles from Boscobel to Moseley.
The Dull Jade.
The Dull Jade, yes. You could imagine, back in the 11, 12, 1300s, they'd have drunk that straight from the brook. And you can see, you won't get many times when it's as dry as this. It's been dry really for 3 months now. I know we've had a few storms, but it's been dry for 3 months. And then the other stream comes. But if you come in the winter, you'll see it much clearer.
Yeah, there's a lot of brambles over it at the moment.
Yeah. And that's one of the tributaries of the River Meese. It flows down to the A41 and Tong, and under the road there, and then eventually flows down into the Meese. Just over the other side of that wood there, we've got the Priory hay, so that was clearly where they made hay for the Priory.
And these names have remained.
And the names have remained, yeah. And you see some of these trees and you think, well, maybe on an early morning in 1651 they noticed a party riding down here. So there was a track down here that went through the middle of there, I'd say. Now I would have said that the groundsman's hut was about here somewhere. The custodian's little hut. We could certainly combine, I have done, all round there and up here. And then the track, there was a gate in that, and that came here. Now I looked at this a few months ago, and amazingly you can't see, but if you look on that picture of mine, the entrance was about here. But it's not clear when you look at that exactly where it was. They've made a very good job. The gatehouse would have been there between those 2 trees. Okay, right on that corner, which if you go back to where we were over there, it's more or less lines up. So this is where the wall was that you can see on the 1912, and this is where all the tombstones were along here. All you've got is a little bit of broken there. I think that is the Joan Pendrell one.
What's left of it?
But if you look closely on that aerial photograph, you can see the tombs along the monuments along here, and down this side I remember them as well. There was a burial area here. This was the altar up here, but important people, I think, maybe the abbesses and things, were buried in this area.
So you think the nuns' domestic area was over here,
yes,
don't
over
you?
There. I'm sure it was. That was the area that my father levelled out in the early 50s when we were looking for food.
So beyond this wall, essentially?
Yeah, on the other side of that wall, yes. I did read actually that White Ladies Manor House was possibly an extension of the original abbess's house, so maybe that stood on the far end. And then these wonderful doorways. So the one that was locked was this one. And probably the tombstones have been taken and put along the wall, the older ones, and then this was used as a sort of cemetery. This is where the door used to be, a locked door. This is where the manor house would have stood, sort of out into this field. But very clearly you can see the line of it there. It was quite a substantial building if you look at it.
It certainly looks it, doesn't it, on the drawings? Bigger than Boscobel, actually.
Yeah, so I think it was a lot bigger than Boscobel, yeah. Well, I mean, they rode their horses in there. If you look at some of the accounts, they actually rode their horses in there when they arrived. See, there was a tower on this end, the same as a tower on that end, which I think has been knocked off. I mean, some of this has been rebuilt and patched up and various things by Ministry of Works. I think the Ministry of Works had to make it safe.
Yeah.
Because once they opened it up and let people inside it, it wasn't really safe. But I remember as a sort of teenager, I used to drive tractors out here when we were sowing corn and various things. And I remember working here in September once, late evening, we were harrowing corn in or doing something or other. And I remember coming round the corner of that wood with my tractor and the headlights, and they shone onto the priory here. And I remember thinking, if somebody comes over that wall in a white sheet, I'm off.
Those stories weren't fanciful after all then.
No. Because I'd been indoctrinated by the custodian here, who was quite convinced that the nuns were still here.
You're here late at night, I would imagine, with no sounds other than perhaps a bit of rustling in the trees.
Yeah.
Your imagination could run wild, couldn't it?
It is an eerily isolated spot, isn't it?
Very much so. Well, I hope your dad got some good crops.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the best, but it was okay for growing corn. But I rather feel this field here, which we call the chapel field, had been used for more sort of market garden type of stuff. You know, they'd have grown vegetables, and I think the nuns were quite an enterprising bunch. And of course they were here for a long time. You know, they were here for 300 plus years. Of course, the other extraordinary thing is that I think it gives its name to this road in the middle of Bristol, which is
White Ladies Road, where the BBC is, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, yeah. And strangely, the Bristol Historical Society, although I've told them this story, say there's no evidence. They've got no road maps prior to 1750 of Bristol, so they don't know when it was first known as White Ladies Road. But I believe, because at one end of it is Black Boy Hill. Now, I believe Black Boy Hill was named Black Boy Hill when Charles stayed in Bristol when he was 15 during the Civil War, before he went to France, and he was known as the Black Boy. And I believe they probably call that hill, maybe he lived at the top of it or something, or lodge, they call it Black Boy Hill. And what I think is that later, when he came back after the Restoration, he visited Bristol, and I think he remembered his journey through Bristol, where he got lost amazingly when he came down from Cirencester. Unfortunately, there's no way we're going to be able to prove that. But of course, it's quite controversial at the moment, because the people of Bristol are thinking White Ladies is to do with the slave trade, and they're wanting to alter the name of the road. So I did point out that I don't think it's anything to do with the slave trade. It's to do with White Ladies Priory, which makes far more sense. Because I think, you see, that's when he sent Streeter up here. He didn't send him to draw Boscobel. He sent him to paint White Ladies with Boscobel in the background. So I think what stuck in his mind was that first arrival here.
And it'd be the first place he came to as well.
It was the first place he came to. It was a place they described. It was a place they planned his escape. I think he was reasonably compos mentis. I think by the time he'd walked to Madeley, walked back, gone up the oak tree, didn't know whether it was Christmas Day or whatever day it was, he fell asleep in Carlos's arms. He possibly remembered the next day when he woke up in the hiding hole. But I think it was White Ladies 15 years later that he remembered. And so I think that's why nowadays, of course, White Ladies is definitely in small letters and Boscobel is in big letters when you look at the story, but I think in his mind this was the place where he found sanctuary, and this was the place where they planned his escape, you know, which was, and the idea was he went out the back of White Ladies. I mean, I can visit it. He walked across that field. He was heading, that's where Richard Pendle and his mother lived, over there at Hubble, about 2 miles. and it was in that direction that he went to Madeley during the night. And that's why I think spring coppice is that wood up there. There's two spring coppices. There's a spring coppice the other side of Boscobel, and there's a spring coppice over there which is just next to Hubble Grange.
So that's to the west of
yeah.
here.
And I see no reason when he came out the back of that house why he would go back up the hill to Boscobel to hide up there. And of course the other thing about that spring coppice is it's very near to Shackley, which is where Mrs. Francis Yates lived with his wife, and she was the one who bought him some food. Well, she wouldn't have bought him from Shackley up to the top of Boscobel. That was about 3 miles. It would have been cold by then. So it makes, and the other thing about spring coppice, which I think you can see from around the corner, is that it's on the high ground and you can see all around the soldiers that were coming. And of course Richard Pendrell knew that, and he took him to somewhere where he got a good view of who was coming. Because we know the soldiers came down this road from Codsall on the next day, and they went along the road to Tong, past Hubble, which goes up that track, and then along to Tong, where of course the Scottish cavalry had camped, and they actually stopped and ransacked White Ladies as they went past, and of course they said they'd never seen him. So there was a lot of bravery there. When he came back here along this track with Richard Pendrell on that Friday night, it suddenly must have struck him, I'm not going to hide him there, I'm going to take him up the bank and hide him up, where there's a tree. Yeah. Because I think they knew there was a lot of hiding places round Boscobel that they used during the day. And I think that oak, which was known as the Hollow Oak, I think that was one of the hiding places. I don't think it was the only one.
So it wasn't chosen at random then, you don't think? There was an element to it that made them...
it was already known as the Hollow Oak. It must have been very bushy. It was one of the trees. It would depend on the time of year, you see. They'd have to select something, and I think it was in a dense part of the wood. But there'd have been other trees, there'd have been other holes in the ground where they'd have hid them. It wouldn't have just been that, because they couldn't hide them in the house at all during the day, because it just wasn't safe. I don't know whether you can see there's two woods in front of us, and then beyond it there's another wood higher up. You can see it from Boscobel much better, but I'm convinced that is a spring coppice he hid in when he came out the back of White Ladies, because Shackley House is just to the left of that. It's a lovely spot here with all this. Imagine in September all these oak trees, there would have been many more oak trees here, all holding their leaves. It would have been a great area to hide, and that's what the priests knew. This was a safe area. If you were hunting for a priest round here, you wouldn't know where to start, would you?